Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Simply Sadie. I am Sadie, and today I wanted to tell you about my 3 attempts at taking the driver's test. So, for my very first test, I had learned to drive in a stick shift. I highly recommend learning in a stick shift because it's a good foundation to learn in, because you'll have the muscle memory from learning in a stick, no matter if you go to an automatic and back to a stick, because it's just a very good skill, per se, to know. I'm not trying to offend anybody if you learned on an automatic, great. I just think that anybody who wants tips on driving, I would say learn on a stick first if you can. So for my very first test, I had practiced a lot, and then I went to take my driver's test. I did not know my hand signals, which is something you need to know, and I didn't know where a few things were in the car, like the emergency lights, the defroster, things like that. So at first the lady was pretty nice. She came over and she asked me to roll down my window all the way, and she told my parents to go wait in the waiting area, which was the parking lot for when the test ended. I did not know my hand signals, and she had asked me for those. I did not know them, obviously, for the 3rd time. So she gave me a hint, and she told me that that we had just did the blinkers, because they'll have sections where they have you put the blinkers on to make sure that everything's working on the car, press the brake to make sure that that's working, the horn, stuff like that. We had done all of that, and it was all going pretty okay. Then she asked me for arm signals. So I told her, at first I was just saying like, okay, up, down, and she's like, oh no, I need you to show me with your arms and actually tell me what they are. So like left, right, stop, whatever. And I told her, I was like, I don't know those. And she said, well, I'll give you a hint. We just did them on the car. And when she said that, I was thinking that does not help me at all. So I tried to do them, and I didn't do them correctly. She modeled them for me and then asked me to try it again. I did, and I still didn't do it correctly. So she asked me where a few things were in the car, which this is the list that you need to know. I will also put the list at the end of the video, or down right here, whichever I feel is a good fit when I edit this video. Emergency/parking brake, arm signals, windshield wipers, defroster, emergency flasher, and headlights. So you need to know those things. We got started with driving, and I had turned on the car because with the car off, I couldn't put on the blinkers. Which, here's a tip for you guys. You do not have to turn your car totally on. You only have to turn it 2 clicks in order to be able to work the flashers. If you turn the car on, it'll scare the driving test person, the driving proctor, whoever it is that gives you the test. I don't know their official name, but it'll scare them. I scared my first test person by accident by doing that. So only turn your key 2 clicks and you should be fine. She got in the car. She asked me if there were any other statements I would like to make, which, looking back at that now, that was probably a hint for me to say, please put your seatbelt on, because that is your responsibility as the driver to do so. That is something that I learned from a friend. When my friend was teaching me to drive, he said, make sure that your driving test person, whatever their name is, make sure you ask them to put their seatbelt on, because it is your responsibility as the driver to make sure everybody has their seatbelt on. So I didn't know that at the time, so I didn't ask her to do so. And I just told her, I was like, we just don't have air conditioning. And she said, that doesn't matter to me. So I was like, okay. So she's like, all right, let's go. So I forgot that I already had the car on and it was in neutral. And so I was trying to turn the car on and I was anxious and nervous and kind of panicking, and I was just really, really nervous. So she was telling me that the car was already on, and I forgot that I put it in neutral. So I put it in first, and then we went. When I got to the hill, I was going up the hill, and then a person on the side of me was coming out from a parallel parking job. Another car was coming down the hill, the left lane, down the hill. So I was kind of in the middle of these two cars, and I was panicking because I couldn't figure out what to do. So I was thinking, okay, I'll just really slowly go through them. So I started doing that, and then it got to the point where I couldn't really do that anymore because I was afraid of hitting one car. So I think I looked at the driving test person, which is what you're not supposed to do that. Always keep your eye on the road. Never look at your driving test person. So I ended up taking my foot off of the gas a little bit, and then I kind of started rolling down the hill a little bit. And I didn't know that there was a car behind me, but the person that was giving me the test knew that, and she yelled at me to stop. And then she pulled the emergency brake. And so I put my foot on the brake, and then the guy from the parallel parking jobs started yelling at us to go, and it was just a mess. So the lady was on my side with this, and she was like, excuse me, we're in the middle of a parking or a driving test, we appreciate your cooperation. And he was just yelling at us like, go, go. And so eventually the lady said, are you in first? And I said yes. And so she put down the emergency brake and said go. And so I did, and then I failed the test at that point, because that was almost like that could have been a critical error, which you're supposed to have 0 of on your driving test. So she had me turn right, then right again, and I was just making sure that I heard her correctly. So I was like, right, okay, right, okay. And another thing was, at the DMV I took my test at, there's a red light and it says no turn on red. I can't remember if at this point during the test, I can't remember if I had stopped and then waited for the green light so that I could go, or if I just went with muscle memory and whatever and just went. But she had me turn left, and I was like, okay, left here. And she said, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with taking you up there and back. And I was like, okay. I turned into the DMV parking area, where she told me, we don't give driving lessons here. And I said, okay. And she said, has anybody been teaching you? And I said, yes. And she asked who, and I told her my parents. And she asked me what they had been saying. And I told them that they had said that I was doing really good and that I was ready to take my test. So she said, okay, just pull over here into the parking lot. And there were a few cars ahead of me, and so I didn't want to try to go into a parking spot if I wasn't able to. So I just was staying in the line, and she said, see, this can't happen. And she was doing this with her hands, and I didn't know what that meant, but I said, okay. And she's like, it just can't. And I said, okay. And so she put the emergency brake up, and then she called my parents over, and she started kind of yelling at them, / just being really, really, really hard, and saying like, we're not going to give her license today, she's not ready, blah, blah, blah. And my mom was telling her, well, she has anxiety, and that might have been what happened, or part of what happened. Once the lady knew that I had anxiety, she kind of loosened up a little bit. She's like, well, we get a lot of those people, it can be overcome, we can get through this. She said, you can come back and take your test in like 2 weeks. I think it was, 2 weeks. If you feel like you need more time, take the time, or else I will see you in 2 weeks. She said it was nice meeting you. And so I gave my mom a hug and I cried and I was just so upset. And I was very thankful that my parents had told me, if you don't pass, it's not the end of the world. Because they know it's a stressful situation. And it took me 3 tries. I got my license on my 3rd try. So that was my first test that I failed. The second test, I knew my hand signals. I knew where everything was in the car. And I was ready. And so I had got through the whole test, and I had told my mom before we started the second time, I was like, please tell them that I have anxiety. And she said, I will, don't worry. And so she did. And it was a different lady this time, thank goodness. The lady came over and my mom told her that I had anxiety. And she was telling her about the first time and everything like that, and about the lady, blah, blah, blah. So, the lady was nice, and we went through everything in the car. I showed her arm signals, etc. And we got through the whole test. But you're only allowed to miss 15 mistakes for the scoring maneuvers, and I had got 16. So I failed that by 1 point. I made it to the parking job and everything like that, and the lady had showed me on the back of the paper there's a little, I'll just show you. On the back of the paper there's a little map, as you can see, and she was showing me my turns, how I was doing some turns that were too wide and too narrow. So that was one of the big ones. Another one was that I didn't look over my shoulder before starting to change lanes. So what I did was I had put my blinker on and then started to change lanes, and then as I was changing lanes, I was looking over my shoulder. You're supposed to put your blinker on, look over your shoulder, and then change lanes when it's safe to do so. That's some of the big things that happened for that one. And I was so upset. I started crying. My mom was asking questions. But the lady was so nice because I was just crying and crying and crying, and she was saying, you still have another chance. Don't cry. Stuff like that. So that was the second time. The third time, I was pretty nervous. But it's weird because the third time I took it, I took it in my grandma's car, and it was on the anniversary of my grandma's passing. And I had told my mom that when we were, when I was thinking about it, I was telling her, I was like, if I pass today, I will be passing on the anniversary of grandma's death. And she said, I didn't want to tell you that, but I knew that. So I took it in her car, which she wanted me to learn in her car. And there were 2 ladies there. One of them was doing both the driving tests and the checklists for the cars that were coming into the state from a different state to do an inspection and make sure everything is correct. She brought over the second lady, which she was the first lady that I had for my first driving test. And my mom had calculated how many cars there were, and she was calculating what car would get what lady. And she calculated, and we were supposed to get the lady that I got for my first try. But she didn't tell me that. And I'm grateful that she didn't tell me that. One lady was like going down the line of cars, and a few of the cars she booted out of the line for some reason. And so I was like, oh no, because I knew that I was getting closer to my driving test. But the thing was that she brought the lady over that gave me my first test, and I could tell it was her because the first time she had lipstick on and a hat, but this time she didn't have those, but she did have a characteristic, and I was like, that's her. I know that's her. And my mom could tell just by the way she was talking. But it was so weird because the lady that gave me my first driving test, she went to the car in front of me. The second lady came over to my car and got in the car with me. Praise the Lord. My mom had been praying this whole time while waiting that God would move the situation around and that I would get the second lady and not the lady that first gave me my driver's test. She told the lady that I had anxiety, and the lady was kind of joking and having fun about it. So it was kind of fun just having her joke around with me like that. And she got in the car and she asked me, because we had the air blowing, but our air conditioner is shot. So we only have warm air blowing, which is just fantastic. And so she was like, Sadie, do you have air conditioning? And I was like, no. And she's like, okay, let's turn this off. She's like, I was wondering why there was hot air blowing. And so it's kind of nice to just have someone that was just joking around and like being all nice. And so she asked me where things were in the car, arm signals, hand signals, whatever. I aced that, which to me was the hard part. I was like, I'm going to do fine on the driving test. It's just the first pre-driving checklist that I was worried about. So I did everything good, fine. And then she said, okay, just follow the car ahead of us. And so I was like, okay. So we did that, and we went on the same exact route that my mom and I had practiced on several times. So it was kind of like God answered our prayers, because my mom had been pacing back and forth while waiting for me to take the test and getting back and everything, and she was saying, Lord, please just let her take her test on the same route. Please let the proctor take them on the same route. Let her be calm. Let the instructor be calm. And everything was fine. I did everything great. It was, thank you, God moment, because we got back to the parking lot. I had parked, and she asked me what my mom's name was, and so I told her, and she's like, all right, let's go talk to her. She didn't tell me the results of my driving test yet. And so she went up to my mom, and she said I didn't tell her what the results were yet. So she handed her the piece of paper. My mom looked at it, and it says at the bottom, congrats. And my mom just started jumping for joy, and then I started jumping for joy and crying. And the lady was saying, I don't know what the big deal was. She was very good. I felt very safe. And we were just talking about the first time that I took my test. I want to show you guys the paper that they have to score you. So it looks like this, and I'm just blocking some personal info on that upper corner. So I only missed 2, which my mom was saying, I think you're only going to miss 2. So it was crazy, but I'm so happy that I now have my driver's license. And a major tip that I would tell you guys is that before my driver's test, I was watching videos on YouTube about people who took their driving test and people who had set up a dash cam. I came across this YouTube show called Canada's Worst Driver, and I started watching that, and they helped me out so much because I now have better knowledge about how to back up when I'm in the car, like reversing, and when I'm changing lanes. Because what I used to do was this: I would have my blinker on, ready to change lanes, and you're supposed to look over your shoulder, but what I did was I went like this, like looked all the way back, and that's not good, because if you go like that, you might end up swerving the car because you're holding the wheel, and if you go like this and looking back, you're making the wheel turn a little bit. So what they taught me was to use the side mirror, make sure that none of the cars are like speeding up or coming right next to you, and then all you do is you just turn your head and make sure nobody is beside you, and then switch lanes if it's safe to do so. Those tips have made my life so much easier when driving. So I would just recommend that you watch that show on YouTube. But on a serious note, if you guys are struggling with driving and you can't get certain things down, check out that YouTube channel called Canada's Worst Drivers, and see if it helps you, because it helped me a lot. So I would highly recommend it. But anyway, I think that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!